The $5 bill trembled in Stephanie Wilson's hand as she stared at the elderly Korean woman shivering on the bench. $5.73. That was everything. Rent was 3 months overdue. Her stomach had been growling for 6 hours, and the overnight shift at the grocery store started in 40 minutes. She needed that money. She needed to survive. But the woman's eyes held something Stephanie couldn't ignore, a depth that seemed to see straight through her exhausted soul. Without thinking, without calculating, without the survival instinct that had kept her alive for 26 brutal years, Stephanie walked into the convenience store and bought hot tea and kimbap. When she handed them to the woman, those weathered hands gripped hers with surprising strength. "Good heart," the woman said, her accent thick but her meaning crystal clear. "Rare." The word hung in the air like a prophecy. Then the woman's gaze shifted, just for a heartbeat, toward a black Mercedes idling across the street. Its windows were tinted so dark they seemed to swallow light. Stephanie felt the weight of unseen eyes on her skin, measuring, calculating, deciding something she couldn't begin to understand. The woman nodded once, barely perceptible, and the Mercedes pulled away into the rain-soaked Atlanta night. Stephanie walked home in the downpour, for miles through streets that smelled like wet asphalt and broken dreams. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. "Sometimes God sends help in strange packages, baby girl." But Grandma Jean was 2 years dead, and Stephanie was alone, broke, and more foolish than she'd ever been in her life. She had no idea that in 48 hours, armed men would be at her door. She had no idea that the simple act of kindness would shatter every wall she'd built around her lonely existence. She had no idea that the woman on the bench wasn't homeless at all, but the mother of the most dangerous man in Atlanta. Hey besties, welcome to Afro-Korean Mafia Stories Hub. Tell me, have you ever made a choice that destroyed your entire life? Drop a comment below and don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Now let me take you back to where this nightmare really began. Stephanie had been surviving, not living, for as long as she could remember. The studio apartment in South Atlanta was a cage of peeling paint and broken promises. She worked the morning shift at a diner where customers left spare change as tips, then stocked shelves overnight at a grocery store where the fluorescent lights made everything look like a corpse. Sleep happened in stolen 3-hour chunks. Dreams had become a luxury she couldn't afford. Her best friend Tanya Rodriguez kept telling her to manifest abundance, to speak things into existence, to believe in the universe's plan. But Stephanie had stopped believing in plans the day her grandmother's heart gave out, leaving her with nothing but medical debt and a high school diploma that meant less than nothing in a world that demanded college degrees for jobs that paid minimum wage. 2 nights before the encounter, she'd stood in her apartment counting pills. Not to take them, just to count them, to know she had an exit if things got worse. The eviction notice would come soon. She could feel it hovering over her life, like a vulture circling something already dead. But she hadn't taken the pills. Some stubborn part of her, the part that sounded like Grandma Jean, refused to give up. So she kept working, kept surviving, kept telling herself that someday, somehow, things would change. She just never imagined how violently that change would arrive. The night she gave away her last $5, Stephanie made it to her overnight shift 17 minutes late. Her manager, a man whose face seemed permanently arranged in a sneer, wrote her up without looking at her soaking wet clothes or trembling hands. "Strike 2, he said. 1 more, and she'd be gone." She nodded, numb, and started stocking shelves in aisle 7. Her phone buzzed at 2 in the morning. Tanya's text glowed in the darkness. "Girl, you okay? Saw you walking in the rain earlier. You know you can call me, right?" Stephanie typed back, "I'm fine. Just tired." The lie felt familiar on her fingertips. She'd been fine for 2 years. Fine through the funeral. Fine through dropping out of nursing school. Fine through the slow disintegration of every dream she'd ever held. Fine was the armor she wore so no one would see the woman underneath. The one who counted pills and wondered if anyone would notice if she disappeared. But something felt different that night. The woman's words kept echoing. Good heart. Rare. As if kindness was a commodity, something valuable in a world that rewarded cruelty. As if Stephanie's stupidity in giving away her last money was actually worth something. She didn't know that across town, in a mansion in Buckhead that cost more than she'd earned in 10 lifetimes, a man was receiving a phone call. A man whose name made hardened criminals go pale. A man who'd been searching for something he'd almost given up on finding. "Mother approves," the voice on the phone said. The girl passed the test. Kong Min-jun set down his whiskey glass and looked out at the Atlanta skyline. 47 people had walked past his mother that night. 47 people had seen an elderly woman in the rain and chosen to look away. 47 people had failed the test he'd carefully orchestrated because he needed to know if genuine goodness still existed in this cesspool of a world. Only one had stopped. Only one had given everything she had without expectation of return. Only one had looked at his mother with something other than disgust or pity. Tell Ji-hoon to prepare the contracts, Min-jun said, and have someone watch her apartment. I want to know everything about Stephanie Wilson by morning. He didn't mention that he'd been in the Mercedes, watching the entire interaction. He didn't mention that something about the exhausted woman's face had struck a chord he'd thought was long dead. He didn't mention that for the first time in a decade, he felt something other than the cold calculation that had kept him alive in a world built on violence. At 6:47 in the morning, as pale light filtered through her thin curtains, Stephanie woke to pounding on her door. The knocking came in measured intervals, professional and relentless. Stephanie's heart slammed against her ribs as she stumbled out of bed, still wearing yesterday's damp clothes. She'd barely slept 2 hours. Through the peephole, 3 men in black suits stood in the hallway, their faces expressionless, earpieces glinting in the fluorescent light. This wasn't the police. This was something worse. Ms. Wilson? The voice was polite but carried an edge that made her hands shake. We need to speak with you. Every instinct screamed at her to stay silent, to pretend she wasn't home. But her car was in the parking lot. Her lights had been on. They knew she was inside, and something about their stillness suggested they'd wait forever if necessary. She opened the door 3 inches, the chain lock still engaged. I don't want any trouble. The man in front, tall with a scar tracing his jawline, smiled without warmth. We're not here to cause trouble, Ms. Wilson. Our employer wishes to thank you for your kindness to his mother last night. The words didn't make sense. Mother? The homeless woman? Stephanie's mind raced through possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. I don't understand. You will. He held up an envelope, thick and pristine. Mr. Kong requests your presence for lunch. 1 p.m. The address is inside, along with compensation for your generosity. Before she could respond, he slid the envelope under the door and stepped back. The car will be waiting downstairs. We strongly suggest you accept the invitation. They left without another word, their footsteps synchronized as they disappeared down the stairwell. Stephanie stood frozen, staring at the envelope on her floor like it might explode. Her phone buzzed. Tanya's name flashed on the screen. Girl, what the hell? Tanya's voice was breathless with panic. I just saw 3 Asian men in suits leaving your building. They look like they could kill someone with their pinky finger. What is going on? Stephanie picked up the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a stack of $100 bills that made her vision blur. She counted once, then again, convinced she was hallucinating from lack of sleep. $5,000, along with an embossed card that read, Please join me for lunch. 1 p.m. Come alone. The signature was a single name, Kong Min-jun. Stephanie. Tanya's voice pulled her back. Are you there? Talk to me. I think I just made the biggest mistake of my life, Stephanie whispered. That woman I helped last night? She wasn't homeless. What do you mean she wasn't homeless? You gave her your last $5. I know what I did. Stephanie's voice cracked. But these men just gave me $5,000 and an invitation to lunch with someone named Kong Min-jun. Tanya, they knew where I lived. They knew my name. What did I get myself into? 20 minutes later, Tanya was at her door, laptop open, fingers flying across the keyboard. Okay, so I'm searching this name and girl, you need to sit down. Stephanie was already sitting, but she gripped the edge of her second-hand couch as Tanya turned the screen toward her. Photos of a man in his mid-30s, devastatingly handsome in that dangerous way that made smart women stupid. He wore expensive suits and stood at charity galas with people whose names Stephanie recognized from billboards and news broadcasts. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, dark and calculating, holding secrets that could bury people. He owns half of Koreatown, Tanya said, scrolling through articles. Restaurants, nightclubs, real estate. On paper, he's a legitimate businessman. But look at this. She clicked on an article from 5 years ago. Police investigation into alleged organized crime connections. Nothing ever stuck, but the rumors are everywhere. People call him the architect. The architect of what? That's the thing. Nobody knows. Or nobody's alive to tell. Tanya's eyes were wide. There are Reddit threads about him, conspiracy theories, people saying he runs the Korean Mafia in Atlanta. Others say that's racist speculation. But Stephanie, every single person agrees on one thing. You don't say no to Kong Min-jun. Stephanie stared at the money in her hands. $5,000. More than she made in 3 months. It could pay her rent, buy groceries, fix her car, Give her breathing room for the first time in years. But the weight of it felt wrong, like blood money, like a chain wrapping around her neck. What do I do? Her voice was small, childlike. Tanya closed the laptop. You go to that lunch. You find out what he wants. And you keep your phone on the entire time, so I know you're okay. She grabbed Stephanie's shoulders. But girl, if this feels wrong, if he scares you, you walk out. Money isn't worth your life. But as Stephanie looked around her apartment, at the cracked walls and the eviction notice she'd hidden in a drawer, at the empty refrigerator and the past due bills stacked on her counter, she wondered if Tanya was right. What was her life worth anyway? She'd been dying slowly for 2 years, drowning in poverty and exhaustion. At least this was interesting. At least this was something other than the slow suffocation of surviving. At 12:30, she stood in front of her closet, staring at clothes that were too worn, too cheap, too obviously poverty-marked for wherever she was going. She settled on black pants and a white blouse, the closest thing she had to professional. Her reflection showed a woman who looked older than 26, with circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't hide and a wariness that came from too many disappointments. The black Mercedes was waiting downstairs, just as promised. The driver opened the door without speaking, and Stephanie slid into leather seats that probably cost more than her monthly rent. As the car pulled away from her apartment building, she watched her neighborhood disappear through tinted windows, wondering if she'd ever see it the same way again. Have you ever felt like you were walking toward your own destruction, but couldn't stop yourself? Comment below what you would do in Stephanie's situation. And don't forget to tell me where in the world you are watching from. We read all your comments. The restaurant was in Buckhead, the part of Atlanta where old money whispered and new money shouted. Stephanie had never been to this neighborhood except to clean houses during a brief stint with a maid service 3 years ago. She'd scrubbed toilets in homes like these, invisible to people who spent more on wine than she made in a month. Now she was walking through the front entrance of a Korean fusion restaurant that didn't even have prices on the menu displayed in the window. The hostess took one look at her and smiled with practiced politeness that didn't reach her eyes. Ms. Wilson, Mr. Kong is expecting you. Please follow me. They walked through the main dining room, past tables of well-dressed couples who looked up briefly before returning to their meals. But Stephanie felt their judgment like physical weight. Her shoes were scuffed. Her blouse had a small stain near the hem she'd tried to hide. She didn't belong here, and everyone knew it. The hostess led her to a private room at the back, separated by rice paper screens that created the illusion of intimacy. Inside, a single table was set for two, and sitting with the calm confidence of someone who owned everything he surveyed was Kong Min-jun. He looked different in person than in photos. More dangerous. More real. His suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, and when he stood to greet her, Stephanie noticed how his movements were economical, controlled, like a predator conserving energy. His eyes swept over her once, assessing, and she felt naked under that gaze despite being fully clothed. Ms. Wilson. His English was perfect, barely touched by an accent. Thank you for coming. Please sit. It wasn't really a request. Stephanie sat, her hands clenched in her lap to hide their shaking. A server appeared from nowhere, pouring water and tea before vanishing again. The silence stretched between them like a blade. Do you know who I am? Min-jun asked finally, picking up his chopsticks with elegant precision. I have an idea. Stephanie's voice was steadier than she felt. And I don't want trouble. If this is about last night, I didn't know who your mother was. I was just trying to help. I know. Something flickered in his expression, too quick to read. That's precisely why you're here. He gestured to the food that had appeared on the table while she was spiraling into panic. Bulgogi, japchae, banchan dishes she couldn't name. Her stomach growled traitorously, reminding her she hadn't eaten since the ramen 2 nights ago. Eat, he said. We have much to discuss, and you look like you haven't had a proper meal in weeks. The observation stung because it was true. Stephanie took a small bite of rice, pride warring with hunger. The food was incredible, flavors exploding on her tongue, but she could barely taste it through her anxiety. My mother wasn't actually homeless last night, Min-jun continued, as casually as if discussing the weather. She was there because I asked her to be. A test, if you will. Stephanie's chopsticks clattered against her plate. A test? You used your own mother as bait. 47 people walked past her in 3 hours. His voice was flat, emotionless. 47 people saw an elderly woman in the rain and chose to do nothing. You were the only one who stopped. The only one who gave anything, despite clearly having nothing to spare. So what? You're congratulating me on being stupid. Anger flared in Stephanie's chest, hot and reckless. I gave away money I needed to survive. Money I couldn't afford to lose. And you're sitting here in your expensive suit, in this expensive restaurant, telling me it was a test. For the first time, Min Jun's expression shifted. The corner of his mouth lifted in something that might have been respect. Not stupid. Rare. My mother used the same word, I believe. He set down his chopsticks and leaned back, studying her with those unreadable eyes. I'm going to make you an offer, Ms. Wilson. One that will sound insane. One that you'll want to refuse. But I ask that you hear me completely before you respond. Stephanie's heart hammered against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to get out of this room and never look back. But she was already here, already tangled in whatever web this man had woven. And the money in her pocket felt like chains holding her in place. I need a wife, Min Jun said. The words hung in the air between them, impossible and absurd. Stephanie laughed, a sharp sound that bordered on hysteria. Excuse me, not a real wife. He pulled a document from inside his jacket, sliding it across the table. A contractual arrangement. 1 year. You'll live in my home, attend events with me, play the role of my spouse in public. In return, you'll receive $1 million. Half paid up front, half upon completion of the contract. Stephanie stared at the papers like they might bite her. This is insane. You don't even know me. I know enough. You're kind without expecting reward. You're desperate enough to consider this, but proud enough to want to refuse. You have no family, no ties that would complicate the arrangement. And most importantly, you're not part of my world. You can't be bought or corrupted by the people I deal with because you have no idea who they are. Why? The word came out as a whisper. Why would you need this? Min Jun's jaw tightened, the first sign of real emotion she'd seen. Because the men I do business with respect tradition. They see an unmarried man in his 30s as unstable, untrustworthy. My mother has been pressuring me to settle down for years. And because I'm tired of this life, Ms. Wilson, I want to transition my operations to legitimate business, but I need time and cover to do it. You would provide both. And what do you get out of this besides a fake wife? Someone who might actually tell me the truth. His eyes locked with hers. Someone who might remind me what it's like to be human instead of a monster. The vulnerability in those words shocked her more than anything else he'd said. This man, this dangerous, powerful man, was admitting weakness. Admitting need. Stephanie picked up the contract with shaking hands, scanning words that blurred together. Compensation. Duration. Terms of residence. It read like a business agreement because that's exactly what it was. Her life, her body, her entire existence reduced to legal clauses and financial transactions. I can't. She pushed the papers back across the table. This is crazy. I don't know you. I don't know anything about your world. And I definitely don't know how to pretend to be someone's wife. You'd be surprised what people can pretend when properly motivated. Min Jun's voice was soft, but carried an edge. Your rent is 3 months overdue. Your landlord filed eviction paperwork yesterday. You have $437 in medical debt from your grandmother's funeral that went to collections last week. You work 80 hours across 2 jobs and still can't afford to eat properly. Each word landed like a physical blow. How do you know all that? I make it my business to know things. He leaned forward, and Stephanie caught a whiff of expensive cologne mixed with something darker, something that smelled like danger. I'm not trying to intimidate you, Ms. Wilson. I'm showing you that I understand your situation. You're drowning. I'm offering you a life raft. A life raft with strings attached. Everything has strings attached. At least mine are clearly stated up front. He poured more tea, the gesture almost gentle. You have 24 hours to decide. The offer expires tomorrow at noon. Take the contract, read it thoroughly, consult whoever you need to consult. But understand that if you sign, you're committing fully. There's no walking away mid-contract. And if I say no, then you walk out of here with the $5,000, and we never speak again. Your kindness to my mother will be repaid, and you'll go back to your life. He paused. But we both know where that life is heading, don't we? The truth of his words settled over her like a shroud. Back to the eviction notice. Back to counting coins for ramen. Back to the slow death of poverty that ground people down until they were nothing but exhausted ghosts shuffling through meaningless days. She'd been dying for 2 years. At least this was a different kind of death. Why me specifically? Stephanie needed to understand. You're rich. You're powerful. You could hire an actress, someone trained for this kind of thing. Why choose someone you found on a street corner? Min Jun was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing the rim of his teacup. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made her chest tighten. Because actresses know they're performing. They can't forget they're playing a role. But you? You'd have to learn to survive in my world. And that kind of authenticity can't be faked. The people I deal with can smell deception like blood and water. They'd know if my wife was just playing pretend. So I'm supposed to what? Actually care about you? I'm asking you to be human in a world of monsters. To remind me that humanity still exists. His eyes met hers, and for a heartbeat, she saw something vulnerable beneath the cold exterior. My mother saw something in you. In 30 years, I've never seen her approve of anyone the way she approved of you. That means something. The server returned, clearing plates with the silent efficiency of someone who'd been trained not to hear conversations. Stephanie watched the food disappear, thinking about how much it probably cost, how many days she could have eaten on that amount. The casual wealth of this world felt obscene. I need to think about this, she said finally. Of course. Minjun pulled a business card from his pocket, sliding it across the table. My private number. Call anytime, day or night. If you have questions, if you need clarification on any terms, if you simply need to talk through your concerns. Stephanie took the card, feeling the weight of expensive cardstock between her fingers. Everything about this man was calculated, controlled, from his movements to his words to the way he made an insane proposition sound almost reasonable. One more thing. She met his gaze directly, refusing to be intimidated. If I do this, if I sign your contract and play your wife, what happens when people from your world try to hurt me? Because I'm not stupid, Mr. Kong. I know that putting me in your life makes me a target. Something dangerous flashed across his face, a glimpse of the violence he kept leashed beneath the civilized exterior. Then they'll learn very quickly that harming you would be the last mistake they ever make. You would be under my protection, Ms. Wilson, and I protect what's mine. The possessiveness in his tone should have scared her. Instead, it sent a strange thrill down her spine that she immediately tried to suppress. This wasn't romance. This wasn't fate. This was a business transaction with a dangerous man who probably had blood on his hands. But when was the last time anyone had promised to protect her? When was the last time she'd felt anything other than alone? The car ride back to her apartment was silent. Stephanie clutched the contract to her chest, watching Buckhead give way to her neighborhood, wealth dissolving into poverty like a cruel magic trick. The driver pulled up to her building, and she saw Tanya pacing on the sidewalk, phone pressed to her ear, probably seconds away from calling the police. Ms. Wilson. The driver spoke for the first time, his voice surprisingly gentle. Mr. Kong is many things, but he keeps his word. If he promises you something, he'll deliver. Stephanie nodded, not trusting her voice, and climbed out of the Mercedes. Tanya rushed toward her, grabbing her shoulders and searching her face for signs of trauma. I'm okay, Stephanie said before Tanya could speak. But I need you to help me with something. Anything. What do you need? Stephanie held up the contract. I need you to help me decide if I'm brave or just completely insane. Could you walk away from $1 million, even if it meant selling a year of your life? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Tanya's apartment was smaller than Stephanie's, but felt more like home, with plants hanging from the ceiling and photographs covering every wall. They sat on the floor with the contract spread between them like a map to dangerous territory, coffee going cold in their mugs as they read through legal language that made Stephanie's head spin. Okay, so let me get this straight. Tanya highlighted another section with a yellow marker. You'd live with him for 1 year. Separate bedrooms, it says here. Attend public events as his wife. Make joint decisions about household matters. And in exchange, $500,000 up front. Another $500,000 when the year ends. Plus all living expenses. Stephanie pointed to Clause 7. Housing, food, clothing, transportation, medical insurance. A monthly stipend of $10,000 for personal expenses. Tanya's eyes widened. Girl, that's more than you make in 6 months. What kind of personal expenses does he think you'll have? The kind that come with pretending to be rich, I guess. Stephanie rubbed her temples, exhaustion making her skull throb. She'd been awake for 22 hours, and her brain felt like cotton. I don't know, Tanya. This whole thing feels like a fever dream. Because it is insane. Tanya set down the marker and grabbed Stephanie's hands. But let me ask you something real. If you don't do this, what happens? The question hung between them like a noose. Stephanie thought about the eviction notice, about the debt collectors who called daily, about the grocery store manager who was looking for any excuse to fire her. She thought about her empty refrigerator and her car that needed repairs she couldn't afford, and the way she'd started looking at those pills again, counting them like prayer beads. I keep drowning, she whispered. Slowly, until there's nothing left. And if you do this? I don't know. Maybe I drown faster. Or maybe I actually get to breathe for once. Stephanie pulled her hands away, standing to pace. He said he wants to go legitimate. That he needs someone to help him transition away from whatever criminal stuff he's involved in. What if that's real? What if I could actually help someone change? Or what if he's lying? Tanya's voice was gentle but firm. What if this is some kind of trap? What if you sign that contract and end up dead in a ditch somewhere? Then at least it would be quick instead of this slow death I've been living. The words came out harsher than Stephanie intended. She saw Tanya flinch and immediately regretted her tone. I'm sorry. I didn't mean that. Yes, you did. Tanya stood, crossing to where Stephanie stood by the window. And that's what scares me. You're so tired of fighting that you're willing to walk into danger just because it's different. But Steph, you deserve more than just different. You deserve actual happiness. Happiness costs money I don't have. Stephanie laughed, bitter and exhausted. You keep telling me to manifest abundance, but I've been manifesting my ass off for 2 years, and all I've manifested is more debt and more exhaustion. At least this is concrete. At least this is real money that could change my life. For a year. And then what? You go back to being broke with a gap in your work history and probably some trauma from whatever you saw in that world. Or I take the $1 million and finally go back to nursing school. Or start a business. Or do literally anything other than work myself to death for scraps. Stephanie pressed her forehead against the cool window glass. When Grandma Jean died, she had $17 in her bank account. $17 after working her entire life. I'm 26, and I have less than she did. What does that say about my choices? Tanya wrapped her arms around Stephanie from behind, and they stood like that for a long moment. Two women who'd been friends since high school holding each other against the weight of a world that didn't care if they survived or not. If you do this, Tanya said finally, you call me every single day. You set up code words so I know if you're in danger. And the second anything feels wrong, the second he or anyone in his world tries to hurt you, you run. Contract or no contract, money or no money, you run. I will. Stephanie turned to face her friend. But I think I'm going to do it. I know. Tanya's eyes were wet. I could see it on your face the moment you walked back from that restaurant. You'd already decided, hadn't you? Stephanie nodded. The truth was she'd decided the moment Kong Minjun talked about being tired of his life, about wanting to be human instead of a monster. She'd recognized something in his eyes that mirrored what she saw in her own reflection every morning. Exhaustion, desperation, and a tiny spark of hope that maybe things could be different. That night, Stephanie lay in her apartment staring at the ceiling, the contract on her chest rising and falling with each breath. She thought about her grandmother, about all the lectures on staying safe, on not trusting strangers, on building a life through hard work and determination. But hard work had gotten Grandma Jean $17 and an early grave. Maybe it was time to try something different. At 3 in the morning, she picked up her phone and dialed the number on Minjun's card. He answered on the second ring, his voice alert despite the hour. Ms. Wilson, I have questions about the contract. I'm listening. Clause 12 says I have to attend all public events with you. What if I don't know how to act at fancy parties? What if I embarrass you? You'll learn. I'll teach you. His voice was patient, almost kind. Anything else? What happens if I fall in love with you? The question escaped before she could stop it, raw and vulnerable in the darkness. The silence on the other end stretched so long she thought he'd hung up. That, Min Jun said finally, would be a complication neither of us can afford. The contract sat on the table at a coffee shop in neutral territory, midway between Stephanie's world and Min Jun's. She'd chosen the location deliberately, needing the safety of public space and the comfort of cheap coffee and worn vinyl booths. Min Jun arrived exactly at noon, looking impossibly out of place in his tailored suit among college students and freelancers with laptops. He sat across from her without ordering anything, his attention focused entirely on her face. Stephanie had spent the morning getting ready, trying on every combination of clothes she owned before settling on jeans and a sweater that at least didn't have any visible stains. Next to his polished perfection, she felt like a child playing dress-up. I'll do it, she said before she could change her mind. But I have conditions. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or respect. I'm listening. First, my friend Tanya. She knows everything. If anything happens to me, if I disappear or get hurt or die mysteriously, she goes straight to the police with everything I've told her about you. Fair. He didn't even hesitate. I'll assign security to her as well. Anyone who knows about our arrangement becomes a potential target. Stephanie hadn't considered that, and the reality of it made her stomach twist. Second, I want the first $500,000 in an account under my name only. Not joint, not controlled by you. Mine. Already arranged. The account was open this morning. He slid a bank card across the table. The funds will be transferred the moment you sign. She stared at the card, black and heavy and real. Third, if at any point I feel unsafe, if you or anyone in your world threatens me, the contract is void and I keep whatever money I've earned up to that point. No. The word was flat, non-negotiable. If you break the contract early, you return the upfront payment and receive compensation only for time served at a rate of 40,000 per month. I can't have you leaving at a critical moment because you got scared. This only works if you commit fully. So I'm trapped. You're compensated. He leaned forward, his voice dropping low enough that only she could hear. I'm not a good man, Ms. Wilson. I've done things that would make you run screaming if you knew the details. But I don't hurt innocent people, and I keep my word. If you sign this contract, I will protect you with everything I have. But in return, I need you to see it through. 1 year. Can you do that? Could she? Stephanie thought about the eviction notice, about the way her body ached from exhaustion, about the future she could see stretching ahead like a prison sentence. 1 year. 12 months. 365 days of living in a different world, playing a different person, risking everything for a chance at something more. Yes. She picked up the pen he'd placed beside the contract. I can do that. She signed her name in 3 places, her handwriting shaky but determined. Min-jun countersigned, his signature bold and controlled. The moment he set down the pen, Stephanie's phone buzzed. A notification from her new bank account. $500,000 deposited. The number was so large it didn't feel real. She stared at it, waiting for it to disappear, waiting to wake up from this impossible dream. But it stayed there, concrete and life-changing. More money than she'd ever imagined having in her entire life. There's one more thing we need to discuss. Min-jun pulled out his phone, typing quickly. Your transformation needs to begin immediately. I have an event on Friday, 3 days from now. You'll need appropriate clothing, hair, makeup. I've arranged for consultants to meet with you tomorrow. Consultants. The word felt foreign in her mouth. Personal shopper, stylist, etiquette coach. People who can help you navigate my world without drawing unwanted attention. He looked up from his phone, and his gaze softened almost imperceptibly. I know this is overwhelming, but I won't throw you into deep water without teaching you to swim first. When do I move in? Her voice sounded small, scared, younger than her 26 years. Tonight, if you're ready. Or we can wait until tomorrow. He paused. The faster we establish the narrative, the easier this becomes. My mother is already telling people about the kind woman who helped her, how I was so moved I had to meet you, how we fell in love quickly. The story is romantic, impulsive, believable because it has elements of truth. Stephanie thought about her apartment, about the few possessions she actually cared about. A photograph of her grandmother. Some books. Clothes that wouldn't be appropriate for her new life anyway. She'd spent 2 years in that apartment feeling like a rat in a cage, and now someone was offering to open the door. Tonight, she said. I'll move tonight. Min-jun nodded once, satisfied. I'll send people to help pack your things. You won't need to go back there except to say goodbye. They stood simultaneously, the contract between them like a bridge they'd both just crossed. In the parking lot, Stephanie saw the black Mercedes waiting, and beside it, a different car, sleeker and lower to the ground. Min-jun walked toward it, then turned back. Ms. Wilson? Stephanie. If we're supposed to be married, you should probably use my first name. Stephanie. The name sounded different in his accent, softer somehow. Are you afraid? She could have lied. Could have pretended to be brave. But something about the genuine curiosity in his question made her choose honesty. Terrified. Good. He opened the car door. Fear keeps you alert. Keeps you smart. Don't lose that fear, even when everything starts to feel normal. The moment you forget to be afraid is the moment you become vulnerable. She watched him drive away, his warning echoing in her mind. Then she got into the Mercedes that had been assigned to her, gave the driver Tanya's address, and prepared to say goodbye to the only life she'd ever known. Tanya opened her door, already crying. They held each other for a long time, neither speaking, both understanding that something fundamental had shifted. When they finally pulled apart, Tanya gripped Stephanie's shoulders hard enough to hurt. You call me every single day, Tanya said, her voice fierce through tears. I don't care if it's 3 in the morning or if you're at some fancy party. You call me and you tell me you're okay. I promise. Stephanie memorized her friend's face, needing to carry this moment forward into whatever came next. And Tanya, use some of that money in my old account to pay your rent. Take yourself out to dinner. Live a little for both of us. I don't want your money. I want you safe. Then this is how you keep me safe. By being okay so I don't have to worry about you too. They created code words, elaborate systems for communication, plans for emergencies that felt both paranoid and necessary. By the time Stephanie left, the sun was setting, painting the Atlanta sky in shades of orange and purple that looked almost hopeful. The Mercedes took her back to her apartment one final time. True to Min-jun's word, a moving team was already there, professional and efficient, packing her life into boxes with practiced ease. They handled her grandmother's photograph with unexpected gentleness, wrapping it carefully in bubble wrap. Everything else felt disposable by comparison. "We're almost finished, Ms. Wilson," one of the movers said. "Is there anything specific you'd like to bring with you tonight? The rest will be delivered tomorrow." Stephanie looked around the apartment that had been her cage for 2 years. At the water stain on the ceiling she'd memorized during sleepless nights. At the window that never quite closed all the way, letting in cold air and city noise. At the exact spot on the floor where she'd sat counting pills and contemplating endings. "Just my grandmother's photo," she said. "Everything else can wait." The drive to Buckhead felt longer than it had that afternoon, each mile taking her further from everything familiar. She watched her neighborhood disappear in the rearview mirror, replaced gradually by wider streets, bigger houses, more careful landscaping. This was a different Atlanta, one she'd only ever seen from the outside. Minjun's estate sat behind iron gates that opened silently as they approached. The house itself was modern, all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows that glowed warm against the darkening sky. It was beautiful in a cold way, impressive but not quite homey. Stephanie clutched her grandmother's photo and stepped out of the car into her new life. The door opened before she could knock. A woman in her 50s stood there, her expression professionally neutral, her posture military straight. "Ms. Wilson, I'm Miss Park, the house manager. Please, come in." The interior was exactly what Stephanie expected. Expensive, minimalist, perfect. Everything looked like it belonged in a magazine, too pristine to actually live in. Her footsteps echoed on marble floors as Ms. Park led her through rooms that seemed to go on forever. "Mr. Kong is in a meeting, but asked me to show you to your quarters," Ms. Park said, her tone making it clear she had opinions about the situation that she was too professional to share. "You'll have the entire east wing. Bedroom, bathroom, sitting room, and private balcony. If you need anything, there's a phone in each room that connects directly to the kitchen, my office, or security." Security. The word was a reminder that this wasn't just a fancy house, but a fortress protecting a dangerous man. They stopped in front of double doors that Ms. Park opened with a flourish. The bedroom beyond was 3 times the size of Stephanie's entire apartment. A king bed dominated the center, dressed in linens that probably cost more than her car. The sitting area had a couch, chairs, a television mounted on the wall. Through another door, she glimpsed a bathroom with a tub that could fit 3 people. "This is mine." Stephanie's voice came out as a whisper. "For the next year, yes." Ms. Park's expression softened slightly. "Dinner is at 7. Mr. Kong prefers to eat with household members when his schedule allows. Dress is casual unless otherwise specified. Do you have any questions?" 1,000 questions crowded Stephanie's mind, but she couldn't form any of them into words. She shook her head mutely, and Ms. Park left with a small bow, closing the doors behind her with a soft click. Alone in the silent luxury, Stephanie set her grandmother's photo on the bedside table and sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress was so soft it felt like sitting on a cloud. She thought about her old bed, the one with springs that poked through the thin mattress, the one where she'd spent countless nights staring at the ceiling wondering if life would ever get better. Now here she was, in a mansion that cost more than she'd earned in 10 lifetimes, preparing to play wife to a man who'd admitted he wasn't good, who'd warned her to stay afraid. She should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt hollow, like she'd sold something essential that she could never buy back. Her phone rang. Tanya's name flashed on the screen. "I'm here," Stephanie said before Tanya could ask. "I'm okay. The house is insane. My bedroom is bigger than my entire apartment was." "And him? Have you seen him?" "Not yet. He's in a meeting. I'm supposed to have dinner with him at 7. "Stephanie." Tanya's voice was serious. "Remember who you are. Don't let that world change you into someone you're not." But that was exactly what she was being paid to do, wasn't it? To become someone different. Someone who belonged in this world of wealth and danger and carefully maintained secrets. Stephanie looked at her reflection in the mirror across the room and barely recognized the terrified woman staring back. At 6:45, she changed into the only dress she'd brought, a simple black thing she'd worn to her grandmother's funeral. It felt wrong for dinner, but it was all she had. She stood outside the dining room at 6:58, heart pounding, hand raised to knock. The door opened before she could. Minjun stood there in casual clothes, jeans and a sweater that made him look younger, less intimidating. His eyes swept over her dress, and something shifted in his expression. "You wore black," he said softly. "It's all I have that's appropriate. Tomorrow the stylist will fix that." He stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. "But tonight, you're perfect as you are." The dining room was smaller than Stephanie expected, more intimate. A table set for 3, not 2. Before she could ask, she heard footsteps behind her and turned to see the woman from the bench. Mrs. Choi Yunhee, Minjun's mother, cleaned up and elegant in a silk hanbok, her face breaking into a warm smile when she saw Stephanie. She rushed forward, taking both of Stephanie's hands in hers, speaking rapidly in Korean. Minjun translated, his voice carrying an unfamiliar gentleness. She says she's happy to see you again, that she knew you were special the moment you stopped to help her. She wants to thank you for your kindness. I didn't do anything special, Stephanie said, embarrassed. Anyone would have done the same. But they didn't. Mrs. Choi spoke in careful English this time, each word deliberate. 47 people. Only you. They sat, and servers appeared with food that made Stephanie's earlier restaurant meal look modest. Course after course of Korean dishes, some familiar from her neighborhood, others completely foreign. Mrs. Choi insisted on putting food on Stephanie's plate herself, the gesture maternal and overwhelming. My mother doesn't speak much English, Minjun explained, but she understands more than she lets on. She's been alone too long, and she's excited to have another woman in the house. Where's your father? The question escaped before Stephanie could consider if it was appropriate. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Minjun's expression went carefully blank, and Mrs. Choi's smile faltered. Stephanie realized she'd stepped on a landmine. Dead, Minjun said finally. 10 years ago. Murdered by rivals who thought killing him would destroy his empire. His eyes met Stephanie's, cold and flat. They were wrong. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Minjun had inherited his father's empire and presumably his father's enemies. He'd been 24, younger than Stephanie was now, thrust into a world of violence with no choice but to become more violent in return. I'm sorry, Stephanie said quietly. I shouldn't have asked. You're going to be my wife. You should know who I am. He set down his chopsticks with controlled precision. My father built his organization through fear and brutality. He was respected but not loved. When he died, people waited to see if I would be weak, if I would fail, if they could take what he'd built and divide it among themselves. But you didn't fail. No. The single word carried the weight of 10 years of violence, of choices made in darkness, of becoming the monster necessary to survive. I became worse than he ever was. More ruthless. More calculated. I eliminated threats before they could fully form. I made examples of people who thought they could challenge me. And I built something he never could. Actual power, not just fear. Mrs. Choi reached across the table and gripped her son's hand, speaking softly in Korean. He responded in the same language, and something in his voice changed, became almost vulnerable. When he looked back at Stephanie, she saw exhaustion in his eyes that matched her own. My mother says I've been hard too long, that I've forgotten how to be soft. She thinks you can remind me. He laughed, bitter and tired. She has more faith in human nature than I do. Maybe that's because she still has faith in you, Stephanie said. The words seemed to strike something deep. Minjun stared at her for a long moment, and the silence stretched until Mrs. Choi clapped her hands together, breaking the tension, chattering something that made Minjun shake his head with what might have been affection. She says enough sad talk. She wants to know about you, about your family, about your life. For the next hour, Stephanie talked about her grandmother, about growing up in South Atlanta, about dreams of nursing school that had died with Grandma Jean. She carefully edited out the worst parts, the pills she'd counted, the nights she'd gone hungry, the slow suffocation of poverty. But somehow Minjun's eyes suggested he knew exactly what she wasn't saying. Mrs. Choi listened with her whole body, leaning forward, nodding, occasionally reaching over to pat Stephanie's hand. Despite the language barrier, despite the insanity of the situation, something warm bloomed in Stephanie's chest. She hadn't had this in 2 years, someone looking at her like she mattered, like her story was worth hearing. After dinner, Minjun walked her back to her wing of the house. The hallways felt less intimidating in his presence, though she still cataloged exits and escape routes out of habit. Tomorrow will be intense, he said, stopping outside her door. The stylist arrives at 9. Hair appointment at 11. Etiquette coaching at 2. Wardrobe fitting at 4. I know it's overwhelming, but Friday's event is important. The wrong impression could be dangerous. Dangerous how? These people are sharks. They'll be looking for any sign of weakness, any indication that our marriage is fake or that you don't belong. If they sense vulnerability, they'll exploit it. Not just against me, but against you. He moved closer, and Stephanie fought the urge to step back. I need you to understand something. The moment we present you as my wife, you become a piece on a very dangerous chessboard. People will try to use you to get to me. They'll threaten you, manipulate you, maybe even try to hurt you. You need to be ready for that. How do I get ready for people trying to kill me? Her voice shook despite her effort to sound brave. You learn to see threats before they materialize. You learn to read people, to know when someone is lying or planning something. You learn to trust your instincts. He reached out, then seemed to think better of it, dropping his hand. And you learn to trust me. I meant what I said about protection. Anyone who touches you answers to me. The possessiveness in his tone should have frightened her. Instead, it made her feel safer than she had in years. What did that say about her? That a criminal's promise of violence felt like security. Get some rest, Minjun said, stepping back. Tomorrow your transformation begins. Stephanie entered her room and closed the door, leaning against it as her legs finally gave out. She slid to the floor, hugging her knees to her chest, and let herself feel everything she'd been holding back. The transformation was brutal. The stylist, a woman named Sandra with sharp eyes and sharper opinions, took one look at Stephanie's hair and declared it a disaster. For hours in a salon chair, chemicals burning her scalp, scissors snipping away years of neglect. When Sandra finally spun her around to face the mirror, Stephanie barely recognized herself. Her natural curls had been shaped into something elegant, professional, expensive-looking. Highlights caught the light, making her skin glow. Now you look like someone who belongs next to Kong Min-jun, Sandra said with satisfaction. The personal shopper, Marcus, was equally ruthless. He took her measurements, asked invasive questions about her comfort level with various styles, and proceeded to pull outfit after outfit that cost more than Stephanie used to make in a month. Designer labels she'd only seen in magazines. Fabrics that felt like sin against her skin. Shoes with red soles that Marcus informed her cost $1,200 a pair. I can't wear these, Stephanie protested, staring at a dress that was more art than clothing. What if I spill something? What if I ruin it? Then we buy another one. Marcus's tone suggested this was obvious. You're Kong Min-jun's wife now. You don't worry about the cost of things. You worry about looking appropriate for the situations you'll be in. By the time the etiquette coach arrived, Stephanie's brain was drowning in information about designers and fashion rules she'd never known existed. The coach, an older woman named Elizabeth who spoke with a British accent, made Sandra and Marcus look gentle. Posture, Elizabeth snapped, wrapping Stephanie's shoulder with a fan. You're slouching. Mrs. Kong doesn't slouch. She walks into a room like she owns it, even if she's terrified inside. But I am terrified inside. Then you fake it better. Elizabeth circled her like a predator. Chin up, shoulders back. When you walk, imagine a string pulling you from the crown of your head. Small steps, not those big strides you've been taking. You're elegant now, not rushing to catch a bus. They practiced walking, sitting, standing. How to hold a wine glass. Which fork to use for which course. How to make small talk without revealing anything real. How to smile politely at insults disguised as compliments. Elizabeth was relentless, correcting every movement, every word, every micro-expression until Stephanie wanted to scream. Why does any of this matter? Stephanie finally snapped after the 100th correction. I'm not actually trying to impress these people. This is all fake anyway. It matters because these people will eat you alive if you show weakness. Elizabeth's voice softened slightly. I've worked with Mr. Kang's organization for 5 years. I've seen what happens to people who don't take this world seriously. You seem like a good person, Ms. Wilson. I'd prefer you survive this year intact. The warning sent chills down Stephanie's spine. What happened to them? The people who didn't take it seriously? Some disappeared. Some ended up in the hospital. One woman was found in the Chattahoochee River. Elizabeth met her eyes directly. Mr. Kong protected them as much as he could, but he has limits. The people in his world don't play by normal rules. They see kindness as weakness and vulnerability as opportunity. So you will learn to move through their world like you belong there, because your life may depend on it. That night, Stephanie stood on her private balcony staring at the Atlanta skyline, her feet aching from hours in heels, her brain overloaded with rules and warnings. Her phone buzzed. Tanya's daily check-in. How was day 1 of Rich Wife Boot Camp? Tanya asked. Exhausting. They're literally teaching me how to walk differently, how to sit differently, how to exist differently. Stephanie sank into one of the balcony chairs. I feel like I'm being erased and rebuilt as someone else. Are you okay? Really okay? Stephanie thought about lying, about saying everything was fine. But Tanya deserved the truth. I don't know. Part of me wants to run back to my old life. Even though it was terrible, at least I knew who I was there. Here, I'm becoming this person I don't recognize. But you have $500,000, Tanya said gently. You can leave after the year and be whoever you want to be. This is temporary, Steph. Don't forget that. After they hung up, Stephanie sat in the darkness, wondering if Tanya was right. Could she really go back to being herself after a year of being Mrs. Kong? Or would this world change her in ways she couldn't undo? A knock on her door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Minjun stood in the hallway, still in business clothes, looking as exhausted as she felt. I heard the training was intense today, he said. I wanted to check on you. Your etiquette coach told me about the woman in the river. His jaw tightened. Elizabeth shouldn't have said that. Should I be worried about ending up in a river? No. He stepped closer, and Stephanie saw genuine concern in his eyes. That woman was involved in things she shouldn't have been. She made choices that put her in danger. You're different. You're under my direct protection, and you're not involved in the business side of things. As long as you follow the rules, as long as you stay where I can keep you safe, you'll be fine. That's not particularly reassuring. I know. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration that made him seem more human. I wish I could promise you'll be completely safe. But this world doesn't work that way. The best I can do is promise I'll do everything in my power to protect you. And I will, Stephanie. I keep my promises. She believed him, which was either the smartest or dumbest thing she'd done yet. The event tomorrow. What should I expect? Wealthy people pretending to care about charity while really networking for business deals. Politicians looking for donors. And people from my world watching to see if my new wife is legitimate or a liability. He paused. Stay close to me. Don't wander off alone. Don't accept drinks from anyone but me or the servers I point out. And if anyone makes you uncomfortable, you tell me immediately. You make it sound like a war zone. It is. His expression was grim, just with better clothes and more expensive wine. Have you ever felt like you were in over your head with no way out? Comment below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. The dress Marcus had chosen for the charity gala was midnight blue, elegant and understated in a way that probably cost a fortune. Stephanie stared at her reflection in the full-length mirror and saw a stranger. The hair, the makeup, the jewelry Minjun had sent up in a black velvet box. Everything combined to create someone who looked like she belonged in his world. But inside, her heart raced with the same panic that used to hit her when bills came due and she had no way to pay them. Minjun knocked precisely at 7. When she opened the door, she saw something flicker across his face before he controlled it. Surprise, maybe. Or appreciation. You look perfect, he said simply. Then he held out his arm. Ready? No. But I don't think that matters. It doesn't. His smile was grim. Remember, you love me. We're newlyweds, still in that phase where we can't keep our hands off each other. It needs to be believable. The ride to the High Museum felt too short. Stephanie watched the city pass through tinted windows, each mile bringing her closer to a performance she wasn't sure she could pull off. Minjun's hand found hers, squeezing once. Breathe, he said quietly. I'll be right beside you the entire time. The museum entrance was chaos controlled by velvet ropes and stern security. Cameras flashed as they stepped out of the car, and Stephanie froze for half a second before Minjun's hand on her lower back guided her forward. She smiled the way Elizabeth had taught her, not too wide, just enough to seem pleasant and mysterious. Inside was a sea of designer gowns and expensive suits, champagne flowing like water, conversations humming with the particular pitch of people who had money and wanted everyone to know it. Stephanie felt every eye turn toward them as Minjun led her deeper into the crowd, his presence commanding attention without him saying a word. Calm. A voice boomed from their left. A white man in his 50s approached, his smile too wide, his eyes calculating. I heard rumors about a wedding. You've been holding out on us. Victor. Minjun's voice was polite but cold. This is my wife, Stephanie. Stephanie, this is Victor Kozlov. He runs import-export operations. The way he said import-export made it clear that wasn't what Victor actually did. Stephanie extended her hand the way Elizabeth had taught her, allowing Victor to take it without gripping too firmly. A pleasure, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Victor's eyes traveled over her in a way that made her skin crawl. Exotic choice, calm. I didn't know you had a taste for. Careful. Minjun's voice dropped to something dangerous. I'd hate for this evening to be memorable for the wrong reasons. The threat was barely veiled, and Victor's smile faltered. He stepped back, hands raised in mock surrender. No offense intended. Just surprised, that's all. You usually keep your personal life so private. Some things are worth sharing. Minjun pulled Stephanie closer, possessive and protective. If you'll excuse us, we need to make our rounds. As they walked away, Stephanie's hands were shaking. What did he mean by exotic choice? He meant he's a racist who thinks interracial relationships are unusual. Minjun's jaw was tight, and he was testing me, seeing if I'd let him disrespect you. Now he knows I won't. They moved through the crowd, Minjun introducing her to an endless parade of people whose names she immediately forgot. Everyone was polite to her face, but Stephanie could see the calculation in their eyes, the questions they were too careful to ask directly. Who was she? Where had she come from? Why would Kang Min-jun marry someone so obviously not from their world? An hour in, Stephanie excused herself to the restroom, needing a moment away from the performance. She was washing her hands when a woman entered, elegant and sharp-featured, wearing diamonds that probably cost more than a car. You're Min-jun's new wife. It wasn't a question. The woman leaned against the counter, studying Stephanie like a specimen. I'm curious. What's your game? I don't have a game. Stephanie dried her hands carefully, buying time. Everyone has a game. Especially women who marry men like Kang Min-jun. The woman smiled, cold and knowing. Let me give you some advice, one woman to another. Men like him don't fall in love with girls like you. They use them. And when they're done, those girls disappear. So whatever he's promised you, whatever you think this is, understand that you're temporary. Disposable. The words hit like physical blows, confirming every fear Stephanie had been trying to suppress. And you are. Someone who learned that lesson the hard way. The woman headed for the door, then paused. Watch your back, Mrs. Kang. This world eats innocent people alive. Stephanie returned to find Min-jun in conversation with an older Korean man who radiated authority. When Min-jun saw her, relief flashed across his face before he controlled it. Stephanie, this is James Chun. He's an old family friend. James bowed slightly, his smile warm but his eyes assessing. Mrs. Kang, I knew Min-jun's father well. I'm glad to see his son finally settling down. He switched to Korean, speaking directly to Min-jun, and Stephanie caught the shift in Min-jun's posture, the way he became more guarded. When James walked away, Min-jun's hand found the small of her back. We're leaving. Now. What did he say? Nothing good. Min-jun guided her toward the exit with controlled urgency. He asked if you knew what you'd married into. If you understood the kind of man I am. He was warning me that introducing you to this world was dangerous. They were almost at the door when someone stepped into their path. A younger Korean man, handsome in a cold way, his smile not reaching his eyes. Min-jun went completely still. Ji-hoon, he said quietly. I didn't know you'd be here. Surprise. Ji-hoon's gaze fixed on Stephanie with open hostility. So this is the woman who's making you soft. The charity case you're calling your wife. Min-jun's entire demeanor shifted, becoming something lethal. Watch your mouth. Or what? You'll hit me in front of all these people? You'll prove that you're losing control. Ji-hoon stepped closer to Stephanie, invading her space deliberately. She's going to get you killed, Hyung. And probably herself too. Walk away while you still can, princess. This world isn't for people with soft hearts. Before Min-jun could respond, Stephanie found her voice. I'm not going anywhere. Something dangerous flickered in Ji-hoon's expression. Then you're stupider than you look. The car ride home was silent and tense. When they reached the estate, Min-jun walked her to her door, his face carved from stone. That was Ji-hoon, he said finally. My second in command. He doesn't approve of our arrangement. I figured that out. Stephanie's hands were still shaking. Is he right? Am I going to get you killed? Min-jun looked at her for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made her chest ache. I don't know, but it's too late to turn back now. He walked away, leaving Stephanie alone with the terrible knowledge that she'd just stepped into something far more dangerous than she'd imagined. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You have 7 days to leave him. After that, you become a problem we solve permanently. What would you do if you received a death threat for trying to change your life? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure you're subscribed because part 2 is going to blow your mind. Will Stephanie survive her first week as Mrs. Kang? Will Min-jun's world destroy them both? Hit that like button and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next in this twisted tale of survival, power, and dangerous love.